The American criminal landscape is littered with chilling figures, but few inspire such dread as Richard Kuklinski, better known as the Iceman. His story is a descent into darkness, a chilling testament to the capacity for monstrous behavior hiding beneath a mask of normalcy. Richard Kuklinski was born on April 11, 1935, in his family's apartment on 4th Street in Jersey City, New Jersey, to Stanley Kuklinski, a Polish immigrant from Karwaks, Masovian Voivodeship. His father worked as a brakeman on the Delaware, Lackawanna, and Western Railroad. His mother, Anna Cecilia McNally from Harsmas in Jersey, was a devoutly Catholic first-generation Irish-American who worked in a meat-packing plant. He was the second of 4 children. According to Kuklinski, his father was a violent alcoholic who beat his children regularly and sometimes beat his wife. Stanley abandoned the family while Richard was still a child, but returned periodically, usually drunk, and his returns were often followed by more beatings for Richard. In 1940, Stanley's beatings caused the death of Kuklinski's older brother, 7-year-old Florian Kuklinski. Stanley and Anna hid the cause of the child's death from the authorities, saying he had fallen down a flight of steps. Kuklinski's younger brother, Joseph Michael Kuklinski, was convicted in 1970 of assaulting a 12-year-old Pamela Dial and murdering her by throwing her off the top of a 5-story building. When asked about his brother's crimes, Kuklinski replied, "We come from the same father." Anna reportedly was also often abusive. She would beat Richard with broom handles, sometimes breaking the handle on his body during the assaults, and other household objects. He recalled an incident during his preteen years when his mother attempted to kill his father with a kitchen knife. Anna was a zealous Catholic and believed that stern discipline should be accompanied by a strict religious upbringing. So Richard was raised in the Roman Catholic Church and served as an altar boy. Kuklinski later rejected Catholicism and regarded his mother as a cancer who destroyed everything she touched. Kuklinski and his first wife, Linda, had 2 sons, Richard Jr. and David. While working for a trucking company, he met Barbara Pedrusai, a secretary at the same firm. Richard and Linda divorced, and he married Barbara in September 1961 and had 2 daughters, Merrick and Kristen, and a son, Dwayne. Kuklinski's family and neighbors were unaware of his criminal activities and instead believed he was a successful businessman. Barbara described him as a wholesale distributor and said he employed an accountant. She did suspect that some of his income was from illegal activities due to their lifestyle and the large amounts of cash he often possessed. However, given his volatility, she never expressed these worries to him, instead maintaining a don't ask questions philosophy when it came to his business life or associates. If Richard suddenly left the house in the middle of the night, Barbara would never ask where he was going. The Kuklinskis divorced in 1993 when Richard was in prison. Barbara said the divorce was for money reasons. She continued to visit him in prison, but only about once a year. On June 6, 1984, Kuklinski filed for personal bankruptcy, listing debts of $160,697 and assets of only $300. Barbara Kuklinski described her husband's behavior as alternating between good Richie and bad Richie. Good Richie was a hard-working provider and an affectionate father and loving husband who enjoyed time with his family. Barbara remembered that when Merrick became seriously ill soon after she was born, Richard stayed up night after night to care for her. In contrast, Bad Richie, who would appear at irregular intervals, sometimes one day after another, other times not appearing for months, was prone to unpredictable fits of rage, smashing furniture and being violent to his family. During these periods, he was physically abusive to his wife. He broke her nose 3 times and once tried to run her over with his car. His abuse also caused her to have several miscarriages. He was emotionally abusive towards his children but, according to Barbara, never laid a hand on them because she threatened to kill him if he did. Merrick said that he once killed her dog right in front of her to punish her for coming home late. Barbara said that she had once told Richard she wanted to see other people. He responded by silently jabbing her from behind with a hunting knife so sharp she did not even feel the blade go in. He told her that she belonged to him and that if she tried to leave, he would kill her entire family. When Barbara began screaming at him in anger, he throttled her into unconsciousness. Merrick also remembered a number of road rage incidents involving her father. In the mid-1960s, Kuklinski worked at a Manhattan film lab. Through the lab, he accessed master copies of popular films, and he made bootleg copies of Disney animated films to sell. Kuklinski also discovered a lucrative market for tapes of adult movies, making copies and distributing them at a regular source of income. Through the adult video business, Kuklinski became associated with members of the Gambino crime family, including Roy DeMeo. He was once arrested for passing a bad check, the only crime he was charged with prior to his arrest for murder. He was photographed and fingerprinted, but the charges were dropped after he agreed to pay back the money owed. Several of his known murder victims were men he met through trafficking adult videos and drugs. He also headed a burglary group with associates Gary Smith, Barbara Deppner, Daniel Deppner, and Percy House. On January 30th, 1980, Kuklinski killed 42-year-old George Maliband during a meeting to sell him tapes. Maliband was reportedly carrying $27,000 at the time. Maliband's body was discovered a week later, on February 5, 1980. Kuklinski had placed it in a 55-gallon drum and left it near the Chemitex chemical plant in Jersey City. He cut the tendons of Maliband's leg in order to fit the corpse into the barrel. This was the first murder linked to Kuklinski. Maliband's brother told police officers that Maliband was meeting Kuklinski the day he disappeared. After a plea bargain, Kuklinski admitted to shooting Maliband 5 times, saying it was due to business. On April 29, 1982, Kuklinski met Paul Hoffman, a 51-year-old pharmacist who occasionally browsed the store in Paterson, New Jersey, a storefront with a backroom holding a wide variety of stolen items for sale. Hoffman hoped to make a big profit by purchasing stolen Tagamet, a popular drug to treat peptic ulcers, to resell through his pharmacy. He believed Kuklinski could supply the drugs and badgered him to make a deal. Hoffman was last seen on his way to meet Kuklinski with $25,000 to buy prescription drugs from Kuklinski. After a plea bargain, Kuklinski admitted to killing Hoffman. He stated that he lured Hoffman into a rented garage and tried to shoot him, but the gun jammed. Instead, he beat Hoffman to death with a tire iron. He said he then stuffed the body into a 55-gallon drum and left it outside a motel in Little Ferry. One day, Kuklinski noticed that the drum had disappeared but never learned what had happened to it. Hoffman's body was never recovered. By the early 1980s, Kuklinski's burglary gang was under investigation by law enforcement. In December 1982, Percy House, a member of the gang, was arrested. House agreed to inform on Kuklinski and was placed in protective custody. Warrants were also issued for the arrest of 2 other gang members, 37-year-old Gary Smith and Daniel Deppner. Kuklinski urged them to lay low and rented them a room at the York Motel in North Bergen, New Jersey. Smith left the motel to visit his daughter. Kuklinski feared that Smith, after he discussed going straight, might become an informant. According to the testimony of Barbara Deppner, Kuklinski, Daniel Deppner, and House, who was in jail at the time, decided that Smith had to be killed. Kuklinski fed Smith a hamburger laced with cyanide. But when this was slow to work, Daniel Deppner also strangled Smith with a lamp cord. According to forensic pathologist Michael Baden, Smith's death would probably have been attributed to something non-homicidal in nature, such as a drug overdose, if Kuklinski relied solely on the poison. However, the ligature mark around Smith's neck and the fact that the body had been deliberately hidden proved to investigators that he was murdered. After Barbara Deppner did not return with a car to move Smith's body, Kuklinski and Daniel Deppner placed it in between the mattress and box spring. Over the next 4 days, a number of patrons rented the room, and although they thought the smell in the room was odd, most of them did not think to look under the bed. Finally, on December 27, 1982, after more complaints from guests about the smell, the motel manager investigated and discovered the decomposing corpse. After Smith's murder, Kuklinski moved 34-year-old Daniel Deppner to an apartment in Bergenfield, New Jersey, belonging to Rich Patterson, then fiancé of Kuklinski's daughter, Merrick. Patterson was away at the time, but Kuklinski possessed keys to the apartment. Between February and May 1983, Deppner was killed by Kuklinski. Investigators deduced he was murdered in Patterson's apartment after discovering a bloody carpet. Kuklinski enlisted Patterson's help to dispose of Deppner's body, telling Patterson the victim was a friend in trouble with law enforcement and someone had broken in and killed him over the weekend. He added it was best to dump the body to avoid trouble with the police, then forget about the incident. Kuklinski made another mistake when he informed an associate that he had killed Deppner. Deppner's corpse was discovered May 14, 1983, after a bicyclist riding Clinton Road in a wooded area of West Milford, New Jersey, spotted the corpse surrounded by vultures. Kuklinski had wrapped the corpse inside green garbage bags before dumping it. Medical examiners listed Deppner's cause of death as undetermined, although they noted pinkish spots on his skin, a possible sign of cyanide poisoning. Deppner was also strangled. Investigators guessed that Deppner had already been incapacitated, such as by poison, because the partially eaten corpse had no defensive wounds and healthy adult men are rarely killed by strangulation. The medical examiner found Deppner's stomach full of undigested food, indicating that he had died shortly after or during a meal. The beans that Deppner had eaten were burned, so they reasoned the meal was home-cooked because most restaurants would not get away with serving burned food to customers. Investigating officers discovered the corpse just 3 miles, or 5 kilometers, away from the ranch where Kuklinski's family often went horseback riding. Deppner was the third Kuklinski associate to be found dead. Kuklinski came to the attention of Pat Kane, an officer with the New Jersey State Police, when an informant helped Kane connect him to a gang carrying out burglaries in northern New Jersey. Kane built a file on Kuklinski. Eventually, 5 unsolved homicides, Hoffman, Smith, Deppner, Mosque, and Maliband, were linked to Kuklinski because he was the last person to see each of them alive. A joint task force of law enforcement officials titled Operation Iceman was created between the New Jersey Attorney General's office and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, ATF, dedicated to arresting and convicting Kuklinski. The ATF was involved due to Kuklinski's firearm sales. ATF Special Agent Dominic Polifrone went undercover for 18 months to apprehend Kuklinski. Starting in 1985, Kane and Polifrone worked with Phil Salamine, a close longtime friend of Kuklinski, to get Polifrone close to Kuklinski. Posing as a mafia-connected criminal named Dominic Provenzano, Polifrone purchased a handgun muffler combination from Kuklinski. In recordings, Kuklinski discussed a corpse he kept in a freezer for 2.5 years. He told Polifrone he preferred poison, saying, "Why be messy? You do it nice and calm." He asked Polifrone if he could supply him with pure cyanide. Polifrone told Kuklinski he wanted to hire him to murder a wealthy Jewish cocaine dealer, and recorded Kuklinski speaking in detail about how he would do it. Kuklinski was also recorded boasting he killed a man by putting cyanide on his hamburger, and of his plans to kill a couple of rats, believed to be in reference to Barbara Deppner and Percy House. On December 17, 1986, Kuklinski met Polifrone to get cyanide for a planned murder, which was to be an attempt on an undercover police officer. After the recorded conversation with Polifrone, Kuklinski went for a walk. He tested Polifrone's purported cyanide on a stray dog, using a hamburger as bait, and saw it was not poison. Suspicious, Kuklinski decided not to go through with the planned murder and went home instead. He was arrested at a roadblock 2 hours later. Kuklinski's wife was charged for interfering with her husband's arrest. Officers discovered a firearm in the vehicle, and she was charged with possession of a firearm because she was a passenger. Prosecutors charged Kuklinski with 5 murder counts and 6 weapons violations, as well as attempted murder, robbery, and attempted robbery. Law enforcement officials said Kuklinski had large sums of money in Swiss bank accounts and a reservation on a flight to that country. Kuklinski was held on a $2 million bail bond and required to surrender his passport. After the arrest, Kuklinski told reporters, "This is unwarranted, unnecessary. These guys watched too many movies." At a press conference, New Jersey State Attorney General W. Carey Edwards characterized the motive for the murders as profit and said, "He set individuals up for business deals, they disappeared, and the money ended up in his hands." At trial, Kuklinski's former associates, including Percy House and Barbara Deppner, gave evidence against him, as did ATF Special Agent Polifrone. The case was prosecuted by Deputy Attorney General Robert Carroll, and Kuklinski was represented by a public defender. Kuklinski's lawyer argued Kuklinski had no history of violence and only projected a tough image, including his statements to ATF Special Agent Polifrone. The defense theorized Deppner was responsible for the murder of Smith, and there was no cause of death determined for Deppner. Additionally, he argued the testimony of House and Barbara Deppner was unreliable because they lied to law enforcement officials, and House received immunity from prosecution. In March 1988, jurors found Kuklinski guilty of murdering Smith and Deppner, but found the deaths were not proven to be by Kuklinski's conduct, so that he would not face the death penalty. He was sentenced to a minimum 60 years in prison. After the trial, Kuklinski pleaded guilty to killing Mosque and Maliband, and was sentenced to an additional 2 life sentences to be served consecutively. State prosecutors explained he would spend the rest of his life in prison even if he successfully appealed his previous convictions. Kuklinski also confessed to killing Hoffman, but prosecutors decided not to go to trial, as they had a weak case and additional life sentences would not have made any difference to Kuklinski's prison term. As part of the plea bargains, the firearm charge against his wife and an unrelated marijuana possession charge against his son were dismissed. Kuklinski was ineligible for parole until 2046, when he would have been 111 years old. He was incarcerated at Trenton State Prison. During his incarceration, Kuklinski granted interviews to prosecutors, psychiatrists, criminologists, and writers. Several television producers also spoke to Kuklinski about his criminal career, upbringing, and personal life. These talks culminated in 3 televised documentaries known as the Iceman tapes, broadcast on HBO in 1992, 2001, and 2003. According to his daughter, Merrick Kuklinski, her mother convinced Richard to do the interviews and she was paid handsomely for them. In the last installment, The Iceman and the Psychiatrist, Kuklinski was interviewed by forensic psychiatrist Park Dietz in 2002. Dietz stated he believed Kuklinski suffered from antisocial personality disorder plus paranoid personality disorder. Writers Anthony Bruno and Philip Carlo wrote biographies of Kuklinski. Kuklinski's wife, Barbara, received a share of the profits from the Bruno book. In October 2005, after nearly 18 years in prison, Kuklinski was diagnosed with Kawasaki disease. He was transferred to a secure wing at St. Francis Medical Center in Trenton, New Jersey. Although he had asked doctors to make sure they revived him if he developed cardiopulmonary arrest, his former wife Barbara had signed a "do not resuscitate" order. A week before his death, the hospital called Barbara to ask if she wished to rescind the instruction, but she declined. Kuklinski died at age 70 on March 5, 2006. At the request of Kuklinski's family, forensic pathologist Michael Baden reviewed his autopsy report. Baden confirmed that Kuklinski died of cardiac arrest and had been suffering with heart disease and phlebitis.